Hi, my name is Marcelo Aller, and this is Bio Insights, the podcast where we will discuss the science of digital medicine and how it relates to your health, your happiness, and to the performance in life. Today, I'm speaking with Patrick Hankey, scientist and digital health pioneer, and one of the five founders of VivoSense, a company specializing in software and developing digital biomarkers that we'll talk about today. Patrick is originally from Northern Ireland. We'll be talking about that bit about his background as well today. He lives in San Diego. He currently works with TransPerfect Life Science. Patrick, to get us started, how did you learn to do your job?
Well, thank you, Marcelo. It's great to be here. It's great to see you,
Yes,
somebody
thank
I've
you.
known in the industry for 20 plus years. And thank you for your interest in having me on the podcast. It's super exciting to be here and talk about some of the things that we're excited about and love. Yes, so I'm originally from Ireland, grew up in Belfast, and was educated there. I got a degree in genetics, then and a PhD in cell biology, essentially in tissue engineering. And with that, I was, again, just super fortunate, not because I'm a great scientist, just a lot of luck is involved in life too. Being in the right place at the right time, was recruited to UCSD and got to work there for a while. Academia is hard. I enjoyed it immensely, but I was curious to see what was industry might be like in the biotech industry, might be like in the US. So I was very curious. Went to work for Parexel, who are a well-known CRO, and they trained me essentially in what is a clinical trial. Very, very interesting process. And then I went to work for a company launching a technology called LifeShirt. The company was Vivometrics. And this was a pioneering effort to get on body signals, interpret those signals, and then use that data very specifically in clinical trials and in healthcare research, which was really kind of paying attention to new sensors and new modalities of collecting data from people. That company, while successful in commercializing this new technology, and we both worked on projects that involved these technologies. That company went away around about
Yeah,
2009. A
shame.
group of us who had worked there decided, you know what, we'll build a software platform to basically interpret data from all of the sensors that we've seen developed in the last decade or so. And that's what we did. We have built a software platform called VivoSense, and that interprets data from all sorts of wearable sensors and essentially measures treatment. What we're delivering is a measurement of treatment effect. And then finally, as you mentioned, I'm working with TransPerfect Life Sciences. Everyone knows TransPerfect in the clinical trials industry. They are a leader in global translation services. However, I specifically work for the life sciences part and obviously digital health, everything from content solutions to functional services. Those are increasingly being part of TransPerfect's portfolio. And that kind of data also fits really well with wearable sensors because COAs and ePro, which TransPerfect can provide, is a way of contextualizing data from a wearable sensor. And we can maybe come back to that question later. But that's kind of how I got here in beautiful San Diego, where I live almost just a short distance from all of the burgeoning biotech industry that is working here. So TransPerfect is interested in finding new clients in the San Diego bio and tech industry. And that's something I love, is just connecting with.
That's awesome. And it's not a bad place to be, right? The, the biggest thing that kind of you just segued perfectly for my next question was really when you hear the word biometric insights, what does that mean to you?
Well, super simple. I mean, I like the most simple definition of things. And essentially, we are looking for signals call them markers, insights. We're looking for markers of biological activity or biological change, biological process. And so essentially, in the medical context, we're looking for a signal of some change that we can consistently measure from directly from a patient's body, not transcribed in any way. Nobody sort of takes the data and writes it down, even in an electronic sense, but you're taking data straight from the patient, you're combining it with data from diary, an electronic diary that they're also filling in to sort of contextualize what's going on with them. And then you're hoping to measure something that is actually important to the patient's everyday life and functioning. And that's actually defined by the FDA. And so we're in a very sort of broad sense, we're looking for a way of identifying patterns and activities in people's lives, be they healthy or be they in a clinical trial or just being monitored for their own health if they have a chronic disease, for example.
Yeah, I think what's really cool is we've had an opportunity to work throughout our career and together on projects, even though we weren't aware of it until pretty much a mutual partner most of the times put us together. So, is there a signal or use case that in your career that you felt that made you feel like it's a great, that you were a great contributor to? There's one I know that I agree with you. It was an awesome opportunity.
Yeah. So, yeah, it has been just a wonderfully satisfying thing to have been involved in creating a company with some very, very smart people. That's been satisfying in and itself, but then the software that we developed and commercialized is used all over the world in research, in looking for signals and looking for signs of biological activity. That's tremendously satisfying, supporting research. And then just some of the most compelling medical cases that we've worked in, for instance, rare diseases like Rett syndrome, where little girls have disordered breathing, or they can be adults too, disordered breathing, where they very distressingly for their caregivers, they stop breathing while they're awake. And so we were tasked with measuring the this type of breath holding or wake apneas. And we used a technology that Marcelo was part of the team that had developed that commercially developed that technology. Bioradio, it was called, very uncool name, but it
It
was a great instrument and still is. And
is, yeah.
that measured essentially these kids stopping breathing. And what we were looking for was a change in this as a result of the medication that they were taking. So this was a new drug development trial. And that's just phenomenal to have been around this, to see genetic diseases now actually have molecules to potentially address them. And now we're measuring that signal using instrumentation that has been developed in the tech industry. It's a wonderful thing to be a part of.
It is very rewarding. I thought that was a really cool opportunity as well. I also feel like um, it shows how much progress there actually was in the last 20
Yeah,
years.
made tremendous strides.
Because, you know, there was a lot of things there that changed dramatically, at least I would say on the hardware side. Software side is just kind of waiting for to work with better toys. Basically, that's how I felt like, because the only significant update would have been cloud updates. But and you've seen probably some of that in your personal choices for your own wearable. Do you use a lifestyle choice, or do you use a device more for performance? Because I wear a couple of different devices, like the Aura and the Polar, because it's one's athletic and one's more like sleep and HRV.
Yeah, yeah. So I do use an accelerometer. I'm sometimes interested in just seeing if I have disrupted sleep, for instance, and just sort of monitoring exercise. It's kind of interesting to just confirm how much activity you've been engaged in. Do you go surfing or walking? You know, love living beside the ocean here. It's just amazing privilege. And you know, as a biologist, to sort of dip yourself in the ocean every evening is just wonderful. So I like to sort of try to measure that, see how much I've been paddling around. And then, you know, is just amazing. There are so many sensors now to choose from, you know, everything from Aura Ring, which is a fantastic form factor, to, you know, Apple Watch. I see a lot of people using that to monitor particularly sleep and activity. So it's been really rewarding to see all of these instrumentation modalities become mainstream. People would ask us, do you think people will wear these sensors? And now we wear them voluntarily. So that has really changed the acceptance, and just great sort of form factors have really kind of won out. So the acceptance of these technologies is great, but our ability to interpret that data, as you said, has changed immeasurably, and is assisted by and machine learning and all of the buzzwords that we see or hear. And we also, I think it's kind of important to say at this stage that, you know, in interpreting these signals, it's not just AI and, you know, magic algorithms, etc. This always has a layer of human oversight in it. We actually call it human, or have called it human augmented AI. So when you're making a diagnostic or you're analyzing data for FDA purposes, often there will be a layer of algorithmic adjudication of the data, then eyeballed by an expert, often two experts, and then if everyone agrees, you know, that, so literally that level of careful adjudication using a human. You don't, even though, even though, for instance, you know, AI can more correctly identify fractures, I believe, you still want a doctor to have a look at that data, you know, and just eyeball it. So that's a very, very important concept to really to sort of understand that when it comes to drug development and FDA, very, very highly regulated industry,
Yeah.
quite rightly so, from every aspect, security, etc. We, you know, all companies now in this regulated space have, you know, pretty substantial regulatory departments that are working all the time just to stay up with the regulate.
The pandemic, it kind of hurt that process though, because FDA now has become longer drawn out process. So a lot of the development side of things have taken its time to develop. At least my observations on the business side, operationally, FDA used to happen faster. I had an opportunity of going through that experience with Zephyr when we brought the sensor BioHarness 3 to FDA clearance. And it's always around a signal. It was heart rate and heart rate variability. And then we created, you know, to your point, is executing that or monetizing that data in some way. That's really the model. Or you do a research application, and I feel like that's what I think would be meaningful healthcare going forward. Is that fair to say? And is there a signal that you feel would be meaningful to kind of elaborate or talk about a little bit more that you think will be, you know, something that you feel will be more impactful in a greater good way?
Well, I think we're definitely going to see in the future, you know, people being on a platform, a continuum, for instance, of healthcare delivery. I like to sort of cite the following. A person might have a disease, chronic disease, which could be addressed by a drug. The patient gets onto a clinical trial for that drug, the drug is successful, they're monitored through that process very carefully using instrumentation and other biomarker data, wet biomarker data. Then that patient migrates onto an open label phase of the trial where they know they're getting the drug, and then they're going to be maintained on that drug potentially for the rest of their lives. And so the prescribers and the regulators and everyone else knows to understand that that drug is efficacious and continues to be so for the rest of that patient's life, for instance. So I think of sort of healthcare delivery being on this continuum and the continuum is actually the platform which monitors their activity and or their functioning is what we're really measuring. And so I think we're increasingly seeing ourselves generate data, generate content, generate signals that are useful, will be useful throughout our lives. I now see little kids running around with 8-year-olds with activity monitors on.
Apple
Those,
Watches half the time.
yeah, and those kids essentially, it would seem, are going to be monitored for the rest of their lives, which is amazing in terms of what we'll understand about their healthcare trajectory through their life. So, yes, I've been fortunate enough to be, had a career looking for biological signals, and that has been curiosity that has run through my life, and it happens to have mostly been directed towards facilitating drug development and the frontiers of new science, understanding patients. It's been a wonderful privilege.
Well, thank you again, Patrick, and thank you everyone for listening to this. I'm going to ask everyone to like and share. And if you want to have any specific questions for Patrick or myself, please leave them in the chat. Thank you again.
Thank you, Marcelo.